Good morning, everyone. Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle, Billings, Montana. Welcome. I'm going to be tying for you today an old Gary Lafontaine pattern, his dancing caddis. Gary Lafontaine was a resident of Deer Lodge, Montana. Passed away too early at the age of 57 from Lou Gehrig's disease, but he was one of the most distinguished researchers and pattern designers of the 20th century. His book Caddis Flies, which was published in 1981, was a result of 10 years of underwater observation. He had people on shore, he was underwater trying different patterns, different materials, observing how fish reacted to different flies, but particularly caddis flies, and tried to find out what the key features were that motivated trout to strike, and the materials and design necessary to elicit that strike. Before that time, we really didn't fish caddis flies. We fished an elk hair caddis, and that was about it. But as I said in the previous video, caddis flies are becoming a more and more important part of our fauna here. So it's important to be able to fish them in all stages. Now, his dancing caddis design was his attempt to design a single pattern that would represent an egg-laying caddis that either one lays flat on the surface like some do and just quiver and lay their eggs and die, or two bounced over the surface while they're laying their eggs. That's hard to do with one pattern. The other type of caddis actually crawls under the surface and lay their eggs. Another time I'll be tying a pattern that represents that. He designed four primary color combinations for this dancing caddis and 11 secondary ones. That was just Gary. He liked to have the right fly for every situation. I will be tying a brown and green, which emulates our very common free-living caddis, or they call it green rock fly. So I'll show you how we tie. I'm going to be using this Gamakatsu C16-8 in a size 14. For quite a while you could not find this hook. It was called a Swedish dry fly hook. They call it a crippled emerger. Either way, it's a great hook for tying emergers. I'm using some Olive Done Uni-Thread Snowshoe rabbit foot dub. I love this stuff for caddis flies. It's nice and spiky, plus it's naturally water repellent. Gives you a nice scruffy look. Deer hair for the wing. This is actually hopper hair, but I like it because it's nice and fine, has even tips. And then for the hackle, I'm just using a strand of Cree, but a ginger hackle would work just fine as well. And you can also use, if you want a little more visibility, a bleached hair instead of this darker hair. I'll leave that up to you. Alright, as you can see, it's an unusual hook design. I'm going to go ahead and wrap a thread base here, almost to the end. I'm not going to go quite to the bend. I like to have a bit of a running start to get my dubbing started, so it starts where I want it to start. So this is the olive brown Snowshoe rabbit foot dubbing. If you haven't used it, you're missing out. It's great stuff. Try to keep it fairly thin. And I'm going to dub down here the hook bend and all the way up to the post. This is the portion that's called the post on this fly. You can also tie a wonderful quiggly cripple on this hook. And right up that vertical side to the top. Now I'm going to get a small bunch of cleaned and stacked deer hair. Doesn't take very much. The wing here is somewhat for flotation, but primarily the wing on the sides is part of the impression that shows that it's a caddis fly, and part of the targeting mechanism that gets trout interested. So a fairly small bunch, and stack it. Okay, since we want the hair tips to point to the rear, I'm going to take it out of the stacker so that's the direction that they point. And I'm going to tie these where the hair tips are about the end of the hook bend and right on top of the post. Measure it, trim it, get a pinch wrap, tie it down. Clean off some of these butts. We're also going to take a little bit of hair out of the middle of this stack. It's the edges that are most important. Go ahead and finish tying that down. And then with our thread, we want to depress the hair just a little bit, like that, so it's more in line with the body. Like I said earlier, I'm using Cree Hackle. You can use something like a barred ginger, and that works just fine. I'm going to tie it with the dull side forward. It only takes a few wraps. Always prepare your dry fly hackle so that the hackle that first encounters the hook bend is bare quill, like that. That helps to keep the hackle from flaring in a direction that you don't want it to flare. So I'm going to tie this right on top of the post with a little bit of bare stem showing and to the back of the eye. Make sure the dull side is forward, and this hackle is for a size 14 hook. 3 wraps. When you tie off your hackle, one loose red wrap, bring your hackle away from you and towards you. This allows the thread to slip down to the quill and traps a minimum number of fibers. That way you get a nice clean front on that, like that. Couple more thread wraps. It's an odd looking pattern, but it really works for those situations where you have adult caddis on the water that are either just laying there expiring and shuttering, or you have caddis that like to bounce around while they lay their eggs. Lastly, trim the hackle on the bottom flush with the bend of the hook. The way this sits in the water with your tippet attached to it is horizontally like this. So with the hackle off of the bottom, this allows you to skip and bounce this fly, and just sitting still and drifting, it gives you the silhouette of a caddis. And again, you can tie this down. I believe the Gamma hooks are available to at least a size 18. So there's Lafontaine's dancing caddis for you. An unusual tie, one you won't see in fly boxes, but very effective. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.